I very much function in interaction, not one way, co-creative learning. So I have a very essential request for as many people as have willingness to actually turn your camera on, because when your camera is off, it means that other people create the field and you are just receiving from it. And I want all of us to be co-creating the field as much as possible and to participate. And I'd like to start this participation by hearing from 2 or 3 people, because my understanding is there are sessions in parallel, right? Happening. So people are here not because that's the thing on the program, it's because you looked at the various thing and you said, oh, in this session, this is the one I want to come to. And I'd like to hear from just 2 or 3 people what caught your attention to decide to come here. Just raise your electronic hand, because otherwise, if you use your physical hand, we may not see you if you're in the second screen. Just what led you to choose to come here? Okay, I'm seeing Lorena.
I raised my
and then Emma and one Gui, and that will be enough. So Lorena, yes, go ahead.
Yes.
Hi.
Hi. Hello, everyone. Good to be here with you. Thank you for this offering. First, a dear friend of mine said they recognized your name and that you had been a teacher to one of their mentors. And so that intrigued me. And then reading the description, I've been learning some NVC, Marshall Rosenberg's technology in Latin America with folks lately, and that's been really nourishing. And then the maternal economy, I was just naming to this same friend who was mentioning this session with you. I have a deep scarring around capitalism and anger. And so my relationship with money right now is kind of feeling precarious and fraught because I jumped off the capitalist train and I haven't figured out how I'm gonna not altogether, right? But for the most part. And so I'm drawn to the title, Maternal Gift Economies, and I'm curious and want to learn more. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned capitalism, because capitalism is a late stage patriarchal invention. Patriarchy has been with us for several thousand years. Capitalism is a relatively new addition that emerges from within it and exponentially intensifies the logic of scarcity, separation, and powerlessness that is what patriarchy came from. And capitalism just makes it ever worse. So I'm not surprised. I'm actually surprised that there's still people who like capitalism, not that people feel angry or alienated by it. Thank you and welcome. Emma?
Hi, I feel like I should go after Wangoi because Wangoi was the one we were having a conversation about you and and what you call
okay,
it.
let's
Right. So go
I'm
Wangoi.
happy. Okay, Wangoi.
I chuckled when Emma put their hand up as well. Sorry, I don't have camera on my laptop. I have been learning with you this year, especially about gift economy and then stepping into the capacity lens. And so I feel like I'm a bit of a fangirl.
Okay, got it.
I'm here.
Okay. Thank you. And Emma?
And so I feel very fortunate to be learning, but the layers of learning around gift economy. I too, Lorena invited in that the notion of stepping out of capitalist structures and what that actually, how that functions, even as we are, housing and or attempting to home, and food and care for and with. So I'm here to learn. And the notion of an antidote to the patriarchal system sings for me.
Fabulous. Thank you. All right. So I am now going to go to my slides, and the way I usually do presentations is I do a couple of slides, and then I come back for a bit of dialogue, and then more slides, and then more dialogue, because I really dislike lecturing. So it was quite a treat to work out the conceptual links between radical education and the maternal gift economy. And I feel very happy to have colleagues to have had conversations with. And I think we have a through line that came out of that. So let me start first with the maternal gifting paradigm. And there is a lot in that. You see, it's like 3 different branches, all of which come together. One is the biology of love, which is very little known. And the part of the reason why it's very little known is because of global patterns of knowledge production and consumption, because the person who coined the term is Chilean, Humberto Maturana. Maybe someone has heard of him. And he has a book called The Origin of Humanness in the Biology of Love. And this is a cornerstone of my thinking and what we used to apply. It goes deep, it challenges everything that we are told about what humans are. Because we are told that what we have within the patriarchal systems that we live in is what humans are. And I'll come back to that later in a bit more detail. And what Humberto Maturana says is, no, that's not true. We are a biological lineage that separated from other primates in a love lineage, which means that the love relationship that exists between mothers and offspring stay into adulthood and don't shift into dominance submission relationships. And there's a lot to it that is details. I really highly recommend reading the book. And it's not the primary focus. So I'm just going to leave it at that. That it's biologically love is biologically imprinted within us. That's one. The second thread here is the thread of maternal giving as the foundation of the gift economy. And that framing comes from Genevieve Vaughan. And it is based on the simple and highly disregarded insight that all of us are alive because someone gave to us unilaterally. It is not possible to survive human infancy without unilateral giving, which means that as a species, we learn to orient to others' needs as a core element. And you see the link between this and the biology of love, which isn't made. Genevieve Vaughan doesn't make that link. Humberto Maturana didn't know of her work. And so I and my colleagues are the ones making that link between the social and the biological in a very simple way. And ultimately, it brings together this idea of reverence for life. Many people have heard, I think, the notion of the disenchantment of the world that came with I just forgot his name. Very famous sociologist who wrote many books like The Spirit of Capitalism and all of that, but I can't remember his name right now, who talked about the disenchantment of the world. And that is what we lost with the disenchantment, is reverence for life. And that it's very rooted in indigenous living, where we learn to take only what we need, not more and not less. Then there is enough. When we live in relationship and when we accept mystery and not being able to know things and therefore surrendering to life instead of controlling life. That is the foundation from which we arose. And I'm going to say it in a slightly different way, which is, again, Genevieve Vaughan says, we are a mothering species. If you think about it like this, it's so radically different from the patriarchal paradigm of control. A mothering species is a species that orients to others' needs, that orients to giving, to generosity, to love, all the things that are poo-pooed within modern societies, which means in matricentric societies that everyone mothers, not just mother's mother, but everyone mothers. And mothering isn't about some biological mystery. Mothering is an orientation to care for others' needs. And in order for all of this to flow, what is required is trust in life, which was ample in pre-patriarchal societies. All right, this is chunk number 1. Coming back to you to hear comments and questions, and please use your electronic hand, because if you are on a screen that is not the first screen, I will not be able to hear and to see you. So raise your electronic hand if you have any questions or comments. I really more than welcome them. They nourish me and make the flow possible, giving and receiving, giving and receiving. So you're not doing anyone a favor by not saying anything. Change the paradigm here, going back to collaborative education. Thank you, Ms. Butterfly.
Sorry, my name is Vanessa, but I teach.
Vanessa?
Yeah.
Vanessa, you said? Okay.
Thank you for sharing that. I think, I came across the idea of the gifting economy before, but not tied to maternity and the idea of motherhood, which I think is really beautiful. And I think the question that I have, especially as someone who I think just as like an Asian female often is placed in a caretaker / comfort role, I wonder like how to like be in that mindset in a world that isn't in that mindset without
I love your question.
resentment and maybe even feeling taken advantage of and feeling burnout and still upholding
Okay.
this value.
I so love the way you framed it. So the first thing I want to say is when the gift of mothering becomes exploited by the exchange economy, it moves from generosity to sacrifice. And Maura, could you mute because you're clicking? Thank you. So sacrifice is no fun. Being taken advantage of is no fun. So finding the line that is actually accurate is a lifelong journey. And I know what you're saying about Asian cultures, and it's not unique to Asian cultures. There is a variant of it that is specific to Asian cultures, and each part of the world and each culture has its own version of how women are expected to be the caretakers. And so one thing is like a little trick from thinking about caretaking to caregiving changes something within me. When I think of caregiving, there's agency within it that I like. There is knowing what is your actual limit and saying no when you go beyond your limit. So there's a capacity lens that Wangui mentioned, but I don't know if it will come or not come in today. But basically, you only give within willingness and capacity. If you give more than is within willingness and capacity, then you're being exploited. And there's a lot of rigor to doing that. Not less than what is within willingness and capacity. But there's something about freeing yourself from the resentment that wraps around giving when the giving is not free. That's like a simple version of the path that resonate.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to go back to the slides now and go into briefly what happened that got us lost, that lost us all of this. And the kind of like the overarching thing is loss of trust in life, is where patriarchy started from. It's not inherent to humans. It's events. Most of the patriarchal turns that happened in human history have been through invasions, not intrinsic to a particular culture, including the patriarchal turn in Europe, which resulted in the horrors known as colonization, capitalism, and all of that. All this came from invasions. I'm not going to go into that, but there were initial societies, initial groups that made the patriarchal turn, and that can easily be traced to usually climatic shifts that overwhelmed a population's capacity to metabolize the trauma. And when trauma cannot be metabolized, it spills. And when it spills, what happens is you move away from trust in life, and then starts the cycle of patriarchy. And once it's in place, it leads to wars, which create more trauma, more invasion, and it cycles on itself. So I just want to say 2 lines here and then move to the next thing. And the first line is: life emerges from flow, functions in togetherness, and results in choice. Patriarchy emerges from scarcity, functions in separation, and results in powerlessness. And our task is to reverse that trend, and we start from the end. Like all trauma, you start from the end point. So the path that we want to do is to restore choice, restore togetherness, and restore flow. And you need enough choice to be able to restore togetherness, because if you don't have enough choice, you come into togetherness and you're in either or, and you lose yourself, and you can't really be in togetherness. Then you react and you move out of togetherness. So separation persists if there isn't enough choice, and you can't have flow without togetherness. So this is this bit, and I will show one more slide and then come back to conversation. This one comes from Marshall Rosenberg, who created nonviolent communication, and this is a schematic model that he used a lot about how social orders reproduce themselves. And you can see that the arrows go from each direction to each direction. It's not a linear process. Essentially, each social order, not just oppressive social orders, each social order has social institutions, the larger systems of how the society as a whole function. Each social order has its own form of education and socialization that is how the culture moves from generation to generation, each one has its own ways of how humans function in that society that is generally the result of how we are socialized. And each one has stories of what it means to be human, what is the good life, how are we, what is creation, all of that is stories. The stories justify the social institutions and the education, and all of it is interrelated, but that applies to every culture. And the next thing will be just briefly how maternal gifting societies reproduce themselves, how patriarchal societies, and then we move to education proper. All right. Okay, coming back. Again, questions, comments, 1 or 2 per slide per each time that I come. Deborah.
Hi, Miki. Thanks for that very succinct and helpful words. I'm curious, you said that that you can trace these kind of flips to patriarchal culture to climatic events. And do you see...
You want an example?
Well, an example, but also my question was just, do you see that kind of potential for that to spiral and become worse now with the climatic events that we're having now and the trauma that's creating in communities? Like, what do we need to do about that?
Who's there to answer that question?
Yeah,
Is
right.
Ted
Sorry.
here?
I work for Transition Towns Network. You know, we're thinking about this stuff. So. But yeah, I guess it just struck me. I guess it just struck me of like, wow, if that's what creates that level of trauma and then that kind of ripple, then we need to design for something different as these climate impacts are hitting us more and more.
Yes, and it's very likely, I don't know, I don't think that this thing is being studied at all, but my intuition, and I think yours too, is that it's possible to link the escalation of separation that we live in to the escalation of really extremely difficult events that are happening physically. And it doesn't matter that we have created them. I totally get what you're saying. Yeah.
Maybe one thing that might be of interest, if you haven't come across it, it's just making me think of it, is the work of Daniel Aldrich from Northeastern University in Boston. And he looked at how communities recover after kind of devastating usual natural disasters and what created the conditions for repair. And in every circumstance, it wasn't necessarily the amount of money or the severity of what happened there, but it was the amount of social and community cohesion that already existed, the bonding in that community that enabled it to
That's
recover.
beautiful. Would you be willing to put in the chat the information about it?
Yeah, I'll go and find the links.
Yeah, and also, are you familiar with the work of Rebecca Solnit? Because she also, I haven't read that book, but I just love the title of it. It's on my long list of books to read. Paradise Made in Hell, or something like this.
Yes, she's great as well.
Yeah, so yes. And so in our work within the community that I'm part of, what we are working is not the large scale of how we change things, but learning what are the patterns and ways of functioning that have that kind of resilience. And as we learn tools, we share them with people. So some of that will come in a little while. Nicole, and then I'll go back to the slides.
Wanted to comment in response to where Deborah was taking this. It's something we've been really concerned about in the group I lead, and we've been looking a lot, and I think it's already happening, what your kind of question warns of, right? What we're seeing, in fact, is that as crisis deepens, as we enter more active phases of collapse in the global north and west, we're seeing much more of what's called political diagonalism, right? Like these odd sort of alliances between the far right and the far out. where the fears are shared, the facts get all twisted, and yet like we want to see people figure out how to break the polarization and like come together and shift maybe their lines,
Yeah.
but it's always pulling up and to the right, which feels like such a strong patriarchal authoritarian pull. And so I'm like, part of why I'm here is because I want to hear about how we pull it back in the other direction.
Okay, let's try. Okay. So I am going to show now 3 slides. They're going to be dense, and then it's whatever you get. I am happy to make a PDF out of the slides and send it to Daniel to share with everyone. So I think it doesn't even make sense for me to say anything, because I think just looking at it and I would be reading out loud what's on the slide, and I don't know that anybody would want me to do that, because I don't want to get into more detail than what is on the slide. Maybe just to say that it's the reproducing flow, reproducing choice, reproducing togetherness, and then I will move to the next slide, and here you see reproducing scarcity, reproducing powerlessness, reproducing separation in how we function. So it moves from generation to generation and through the social systems. The fun part comes right after this, so I am going to move to the slide that looks at the same 4 spheres through what are pathways for change. And here I'm going to say a bit more. I imagine everybody knows about collective action, but what is the point of collective action that can actually create change is to focus on how decisions are made. And way too much of the focus of different things is focused on this decision or that decision. Let's change Roe versus Wade in the USA. Let's change the law that does this or does that, or let's stop this company from doing something. And the actual rules of how the systems function stay the same. So there's nonviolent resistance that is really focused on how to change the way the system functions. And then there's constructive program, which is another aspect of nonviolence, which is building the alternatives within the system as is, with the idea that when you create blueprints and they exist, people will copy them with ease, and they will eventually, possibly, maybe, become more familiar. Then in the area of education and socialization, what education can offer is supporting the next generation to reduce the gap between what we have now and what the vision is of what's possible for humans in terms of realigning with life. That's a very different goal for education than any that I hear generally. This is education for deep liberation. And then on the human behavior layer, we need to relearn how to do choice within togetherness and not instead of togetherness, how to create resource flow that is based on needs and not on already existing resources, how to create collaborative leadership rather than either top-down leadership or no leadership and all of these things, and telling stories like what I'm doing now is I'm telling a story of what's possible, and having a story of what's possible that restores vision and trust, supports the movement. And also it's important to show the gap. There's a lot of places where it's just not known, where people just don't know what the cost of all that we're doing now actually is. All right, back to you. Questions, comments? Wangui.
Hi, Miki. I have a question that's coming from the actual previous slides. I wondered if you might share some experiments in restoring choice that you all maybe have tried out in the vagabonding group or with nonviolent.
I think I want to hold that because I think it will become clearer later when I get to talking about what we're doing within our community. Are you up for waiting?
Yes.
Thank you. And I want to hear from Stephanie, even though Lorena, you just raised your hand first, just to create a wider pool of people who are speaking. Stephanie.
Hello, Miki. Thank you so much for this beautiful presentation. I really wanted to reflect my gratitude and my kind of vision that this space that you're creating is part of the ecosystem of renewal that is happening, and it's deeply inspiring to me and what I want to offer. So I just wanted to thank you very much for that.
Thanks. I like that idea. Ecosystem of, what did you say, of renewal?
Of renewal, yeah.
Yeah, I like ecosystem of renewal. Maybe I'll remember that. Thank you.
It's gonna take all of us doing our gifts, you know, towards this vision to make it happen. Yeah.
Thank you. Jenna?
Hi, thank you. I was just curious if you could speak a little tiny bit more about the gap between vision and reality that you reference in your slide.
Yeah. So the vision is humanity realigned with life. What do we have now? A super low capacity species. We can't make decisions together. Even the bodies that have been created for the possibility of collective decisions on behalf of humanity are unable to function. Constant polarization, massive disempowerment on the part of most people on the planet, massive disempowerment. And our ability to direct resources to where they are needed is almost non-existent. Is that helping? Is that specific enough what I'm saying, Jenna? Thank you. All right. So now we go to education. So we are zeroing in on this part, supporting the next generation. And later we will zero in on another part. So here are some lessons from educational giants. And this kind of like brings together Paulo Freire, Ivan Illich, Marshall Rosenberg, and little bits of bell hooks. So the first shift, they kind of like, I like to think in terms of shifts. So some of the shifts that I'm seeing here in their work is moving from knowledge consumption to knowledge co-creation. You see that I was speaking about it here. I want us to be together, not just me speaking and you taking it in. Some of what is happening wouldn't happen if you didn't say your pieces. I wouldn't necessarily on my own think of saying the things that I said to Jenna, for example, just now. It came through the questions, but it enriches it. Second is from control and power over to natural authority, which means natural authority is I, as the teacher, I'm not expecting you to do what I say. I'm expecting myself to embody qualities, experience, and knowledge that would naturally generate trust and respect in you, so you would want to hear from me. Otherwise, I'm forcing you, and forcing doesn't help learning. Then there's the piece of moving from standardized curriculum that standardizes people and slots them into boxes, into needs-based learning, so that each individual and each group, we know what that individual or group needs to learn, and we orient curriculum in such a way that it addresses various needs, not just one set of needs. Then there's the move from obedience to critical thinking, so that people learn to think for themselves, to question systems, to question what is happening, to question what is happening within them, around them, and in the world at large, rather than just yes, sir, yes, ma'am. Then there is the shift from shaming to deep self-trust. I find it quite crazy what is happening in schools. There's so much obedience and shaming. And how anyone expects any child to learn anything in that environment is really unclear to me. Because when we are in a state of shame or fear, our capacity to learn shrinks. Literally, there's no room for new information because we are in survival mode. And then the last one is shifting from discipline to love as the foundation of teaching. Oh, who is it? I forgot your name. Can you disable people being able to draw on the slide, on the shared screen? That is possible to do. I just don't remember the setting.
Okay,
So
we're going to be starting interpretation here, so just be mindful of the speed. Thank you.
oh, you're doing you're talking about sign language interpretation? No, I
No.
don't understand.
Spanish interpretation.
I'm sorry, I'm not following. Is there something you
Interpretation in Spanish.
Live interpretation, English to Spanish, starting.
Ah, okay. Got it. Okay, so you want me to slow down a bit? Okay. So this thing about putting love at the center of teaching links education directly back to us being a mothering species that I talked about earlier. So I think that's enough to see if there are any comments or questions. Are all these, yes, Miss Butterfly and Jenna, and that's, oh, there's a third one. Okay, so I would like to start with the third one. I generally want to prioritize people who haven't spoken. Yes, Peyton.
Hi, Miki. Can you hear me all right?
So far, so good.
Okay. I actually had a question following Miss Butterfly's question at the beginning relating to walking that balance between generosity and sacrifice. Can you offer any guidance on calling on others for support? You know, when you're in this flow of generosity, you're trying to be in trust. It also doesn't need to be anonymous, and you can't actively call on support. So can you give a bit of guidance on like expressing needs and seeking out support for your own needs to be fulfilled?
I did not understand the anonymity thing.
Just asking if you can give any guidance on seeking support to fulfill your own generosity. Like if you're in a position of trying to open that flow of generosity, how can you, you know, kind of build your confidence so you feel supported and assured that you will be taken care of?
What is keeping you from asking for what you need? What is it?
I can say for myself, a disconnection from my own needs and a disconnection from my voice and expressing that. Yeah.
What made it possible for you to ask for what you need right now?
I think
I would not have known that you need this if you didn't ask for it. So you crossed that threshold right now. What made it possible?
right now I feel comfortable.
Okay. I am a big believer in baby steps. And one baby step that I like in general when we're trying to learn new behavior that is outside of our habitual, comfortable behavior is we check to see where is the limit of the comfort and add 5%. Just so this is comfortable for you and you could ask. And there are places where it's completely beyond capacity. You wouldn't be able to ask for anything. That's not a place where experimenting and growing capacity makes sense. But there's something that is very close to the comfortable, just 5% more, an environment where you can take a risk because if it fails, you're not going to suffer immensely, only just a tiny bit. And then you learn and you grow, you grow your muscles. And soon enough, what was 5% uncomfortable is now within your comfort zone and you can stretch 5% more. That's kind of like a general way of growing capacity. Not the only one, but one. Yeah?
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Daniel?
Yeah, I'm raising my hand for Steve, who messaged in the chat that he's unable to use the raise hand signal. So Steve, if
Okay.
you want to share.
Yeah, thanks. And you're muted, Steve. Can you unmute yourself? Yeah.
Miki, shall I just go ahead?
Yeah.
Yeah, quick question. In terms of creating the environment for the kind of shift that you were describing in education, how do you envision like setting up some kind of environment for that kind of emphasis that you're giving practically, like outside of the system? Because it seems like we need to find ways to bring this kind of emphasis into, into the mainstream. But how do we do that when we're up against the kind of education system that we have right now?
This is something I want to leave for, there's a time for breakout groups, and I would like that experiment to happen there. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Ima.
Yeah, I had a similar question because I'm in India, and so like when we are saying these kind of space that should evolve for a child from shame to trust, it has got to do a lot with the teacher's mindset. So have you explored anything like, because I see even the current system in education here in India, it's purely based on rote learning, fear of failure in exams,
Yes.
The teacher power centered.
Yes.
So that is where
this is, I think changing it at that level is beyond any of our capacities. One of the key lessons that I have learned is we really need to know what exactly is our sphere of influence and create change within our sphere of influence rather than preoccupying ourselves with all the changes that must happen, blah, blah, blah. Then we can't do anything. So I would think, like, for example, this may not be relevant to your case. If you have a child who is in a school setting and things are happening within that child's life in how the teachers are treating the child, then you can engage with that teacher to create that change And if you can create that change there, then the next thing is maybe you talk to the principal and maybe you change the way that there are teacher meetings happening in the school. I'm just making it up. You keep it small, but you go radical within your sphere of influence. I can't tell you how to change the Indian education system. Does that ring possible anywhere in you? That idea of just doing what
Yes,
is within your
because
sphere of influence?
here, the school that I'm working also, like we see the corporal punishment. The teachers believe
Yeah,
that, almost like 75% of the teachers believe that you have to punish the child. You have to shame the child, bring that fear. 25% we
yeah.
feel
So
okay, love and compassion is what we need to practice. So
yeah, yeah.
yeah.
Okay, thank you. Back to the slides. Just to say, it's very clear to me that each of these we could easily talk about for days. So I'm just kind of like sprinkling something. Okay, so now I have 2 slides that are about aligning education with maternal gifting and life. And it's not a how-to, it's a meta-level principles for what we can do to do that. So when we orient to needs, it antidotes a very common either or, which is you force, or if you don't want to force anyone, then you just do free for all. And free for all, I don't believe, is actually a coherent educational system that can actually create liberation. Then you have willingness that can antidote the reproduction of the social order through obedience. So willingness is a deep principle. I already kind of mentioned it in talking to, I know it's not, your name is not Miss Butterfly, but that's how I remember you, maybe forever now. There's whatever the name is, that it needs to happen. Things need to happen within willingness. A child of any age needs to have freedom. I once did a workshop. It was the last workshop that I did for educators because I am too identified with the children to be able to accept the depth of internalization of needing to pass on authority to children. And I asked them a simple question: what needs do they see themselves responsible for caring for the children? And they came up with a whole bunch of needs, but they did not mention freedom or choice as needs that they see it as their responsibility to support children around those needs. I think those are vital for children of any age, including our age, however old we are. Then there's the capacity lens that I almost mentioned earlier, which is a recognition that each of us functions based on what is actually within capacity. And if we are shamed or judged, it's not going to increase our capacity, it's actually going to lower it. So if we can bring acceptance to our own and each other's capacity limits, then overall capacity grows. It's a kind of a beautiful positive paradox. And there's a second slide, but for this slide, I imagine you all know the banking model of education. And one of the ways to exit that is to have mutual feedback. So it's not just the teacher who gives feedback to the students, it's also the students who give feedback to the teacher. Then we are all human together. We're all learning together in different places. It's not pretending that we are equal. It's recognizing that we are all full human beings, no matter our age, our knowledge, our capacity, or any of that. And the second part of this, and that's the end of education, then I move to what we're doing in our community, is that we can bring trust in life into the educational setting to antidote the huge pressure on control that all patriarchal societies are based on. We can increase how much learning happens from life and within life and through practical problems to solve, rather than in abstraction, which is what most education is based on, abstraction. My nephew was homeschooling for his entire education, and they used the unschooling model. And for example, he participated in baking, and baking was an opportunity to learn about multiplication and division. Because if you have more or less portions that you want to create, then you need to do that. So that learning was organic within it. Then one of my pet peeves about education is age segregation, that for the first 18 years of a person's life, hours and hours and hours every day, they are with a certain number of other human beings who are within 4 or 5 months of when they were born, and 1 or 2 or 3 adults. That is not what life is about. So if we learn full collaboration, then older children can teach younger children. Younger children can sometimes teach older children about what they know, and we all learn together. We don't need to be separated into age groups. Then there is intrinsic motivation, which is totally supported by needs-based curriculum, and the whole idea of performance goes out the window. And finally, engaging with the gap that we talked about before, really inviting people of all ages to look at what is happening in the world. That is a way to reduce the denial of the links and the impacts from what we are doing on the planet and on people elsewhere, which always remains abstract. So this is the way that I see of aligning education with maternal gifting. And now a couple of, oh dear, I don't think I actually slowed down. KP Sig.
Albert says you're okay.
Okay, fabulous. Thank you.
Thanks, Miki. Actually, this is about my child. She stepped into teens recently. And on this age segregation part, because she also interacted with she had been going into experiential learning school. So we are not homeschooling her. And she started interacting with her little elder peers. And she also picked up this Instagram and phone thing, because they had this phone and Instagram. Now she's glued to the screen. And no matter
this is completely beyond my capacity to address in this time. It's a very, very deep topic, screens and sugar and all of that, and I don't think I can do it any justice, so I would rather not try. And I mourn, because I totally imagine there's real suffering in what you're talking about. And I just want to take a moment to breathe and say I don't have anything that can be usefully addressed within the context of what we're doing here. But there's a video. It would be too difficult. I think I have some colleagues here. If you can find the sugar and screens video link on the Fearless Heart. You don't have to understand me. It's enough that Vanda, do you know how to find it?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes.
just put it in the chat.
Just to say that NGL within the All Ages Collaboration Lab, we are planning with Lisa something specifically for this.
Okay, thank you. Sarah. You're muted. Sarah, you're muted.
Apologies. Greetings from Aotearoa, New Zealand. Thank you so much for your presentation. It's been great. I'm just wondering, we're all pickled in patriarchal ways of being, and that brine has influenced our imaginations really strongly. Sometimes it feels when we imagine into maternal ways of being that because our imagination is so informed by the patriarchy, we continue to operate inside a binary way of being that's very like heteronormative and oriented towards the mother as the archetype. And I know the intention of maternal ways of being is fully inclusive, but I wonder sometimes because our imagination is so informed by the binary, I'm just wondering, how do we ensure that we don't just re-describe an either or, when really what we're trying to create is a place of full inclusion, including those who may not be able to mother and those who are sit outside the binary. And yeah, I'm just wondering like what rises in you when I know sometimes some of the conversations that are held around like divine womanhood can be very, very exclusionary of many, many peoples. So I just wondered how you might respond to some of those thoughts.
The one thing that I must tell you, two things. One is I think we have a big, huge puzzle to solve here, and we're not going to solve it here today. There are many, many layers, and it's much more complex than full inclusion. But the one thing that I can say is in pre-patriarchal societies, mothering and women were at the center of the society, and everyone lived well. That is a clue for me that there's something that is possible. And that's as far as I know. The rest we will need to work out through very deep and ongoing conversations across lines of very significant divergences that we are not going to address here today.
Cool. Thank you. I totally agree with you. Just wondering about how we kind of stretch the limits of our imagination because we've been informed by such limiting worldviews for such a time.
Thank you. I think telling stories, many stories. I have a book that I wrote called Reweaving Our Human Fabric. And there's a section of that book that is called Wisdom Tales from the Future that has 12 fictional stories about what life could look like in a post-patriarchal world. Yeah. Just actual stories, fictional stories that don't have anything to do with how life is here now, just to exactly fertilize the imagination. All right. Almost ready for, oops, what is happening? Okay, so, nope. So now I'm moving to NGLR community. Nonviolent Global Liberation is our full name. And I'm just going to share about us as a case study, and in this way link to the back to the global systems. So we have a project that is not even yet created as a real project. It's just right now seeds in people's imaginations and conversations. And we call it the Liberation University. But in talking about what we're doing here, it suddenly became clear that we have already started this project without even designing it, that it's already happening. So there are two bits that we're doing. One is we are integrating liberation into everything that we're doing. So, for example, we have an idea of liberation for all that is in the area of power and privilege, where instead of, swapping, those were the oppressors and those were the oppressed, and now we're going to swap, and these are going to be the oppressed, and everybody else is going to be the bad guys. It's like, how do we actually care for everyone, including current oppressors? And I'm not going to get into all of this because you're going to receive this, but I want to talk about this thing about the all ages collaboration, which Vanda mentioned. And one idea of it is having 3 spaces, 3 different kinds of spaces. And it's very early. We haven't yet managed to fully implement it, but the idea is very exciting to us. There are 3 spaces when you want to integrate adults and children or people of all ages. One is a space called adults following children. And everybody knows if you enter that space, the children decide what is going to happen and the adults will follow them. One is called children following adults. And that is a space where it's basically adult activities. And if children want to be part of adult activities, they are very welcome, but they're not welcome to come in and try to change what the adults are doing. And the third space is adults and children co-creating, interacting, and collaborating what is going to happen. And this seems very fertile to us in terms of being able to create educational settings that do something very different from what we have right now. And then the other thing is that we are constantly researching and experimenting. Everything that we're doing within the Nonviolent Global Liberation is an experiment. And part of what's unique about it is we are researching ourselves. We're not researchers that are researching something over there. We're researching what we're doing and what we can learn from it for the purposes that we have. We make public everything that we discover. And I think as I'm seeing the ticking clock, I'm going to jump and skip. And like I said, this slide deck will be shared with you. The next thing that I want to share with you is how we deal with money, which links it to the resource sharing part of it. So everything that we do within NGL is offered as a gift. There isn't anything that has a fee or that we charged for. We totally ask for money. This is actually speaking on a larger scale to the question that I don't remember your name about, how do I ask to nurture my generosity? We ask for everything that we need. There are many of us who, all of us need to figure out how to keep a roof over our head and food and clothing and health and all of that. So we ask for the money that we need. We function without bosses, with employees, board, or legal existence. From a legal perspective, we're just a collection of individuals, but we function very cohesively all over the planet. The only continent that we don't yet have people in is Africa, though we have people of African descent within the community. And every 4 months, we distribute money. There are about 10 of us, I'm included, who are completely dependent on the money that comes to NGL to be able to sustain ourselves, and others who are partially dependent. And we're not talking about $10. We're talking about for the last time we distributed, it was $150,000. So that means that over the course of 4 months, people gave us freely, without being charged, $150,000, and then we distributed them amongst us completely on the basis of need and purpose. And I think I am going to leave it here. Again, you can see more in the slides. And now I'm going to see if I'll take just one question or comment so I can complete the round before doing what we want to do. It's going to be very tight. Yeah. Now everybody's going, no, I'm not going to ask a question so that you can get through the rest of it. Is that what's going on? Okay, Andrew.
Thank you. I do have a question. Maybe it will be short. Yeah, this has been really inspiring. So thank you so much. My question is very specific at the end. I'm so glad you brought up money because that's been on the back of my mind for a lot of this conversation. And you also mentioned that you're not a legal entity. And so I'm just curious about how you manage money flow without being a legal entity.
I will give you the very simple answer. Money comes into individuals and is distributed from individuals to individuals.
Great, thank you.
And if you're interested to know more, just go to our website and follow whatever. Not all the information is there, but you'll find a way to ask more information and find out if you're interested. Yeah. And Julie?
Hi, this is so interesting. What you just said about money really made me feel very good about how I did with my children, and I just want to share it very shortly. I had 4 kids, and they are adults now, and for me, everything was given as a gift, always. I never paid my children to do anything. It was always based upon their needs. So I would always tell them, whatever you need, find a way to explain what you need, and we'll discuss about how I can help you. And I never had a lot of money. I was always pretty on the low side of money, but my kids always grew up feeling that everything was very generous and very, we felt we were
Love
very
it.
blessed. And they actually learned so much through that action of having to think about their own needs, to be able to ask, instead of me giving like money every week for them to do anything. We would just do everything together as we could. Per se, I had one of my child who was autistic, couldn't do as much as the other children. And as they grew up, they were feeling it was unfair. But at the end, it was all about what needs do we have, and how do we deal together with the money that we have. And it worked so well. So I just wanted to share that, and it really boosted
Thank
me to hear
you.
you.
Thank you. I love it.
Thank you
I
to
love
you.
knowing this, and I love that you chose to share. Thank you. All right, just the final bit is tying it back to the global. So our belief and conviction is that what we are doing on a fairly small scale within NGL is completely scalable to the entire global human population. And so I just wanted to share a tiny bit about what that would entail, just as a story to nourish our imagination. One key element of being able to flow resources based on needs is that information needs to be available and accessible. Just like Julie would not know how to support her children with their needs if they didn't know how to make their needs known. Economics now functions on the basis of effective demands. Effective demands are not needs. Effective demands are what people want who have money to get it. And real needs go unattended because if the person doesn't have money. And we need to focus on needs. We need to shift from externalities and costs to actual impacts, from accumulation and waste to making resources available. And that's key, so that all the information is known. We need to know what are the needs, what are the impacts, what are the resources that are available to be able to distribute them. So that's one shift. Second shift is choice within togetherness. And this is absolutely key, and one of the big errors of communist socialist experimentation, which also wanted to try to work with needs, is that needs were dictated. You have so many kids, that's what you get. It's not like that. We have to leave people with the capacity and the agency to define their own needs, while also staying within capacity and willingness of the whole. That dance is exactly the choice within togetherness. And the last bit is how decisions are made, and basically as local as possible. So it's local units decide the resource distribution within them. Several units decide the resource distribution between the units, and so on and so forth, as local as possible, entirely doable. And another principle is attending to all essential needs before anything else gets attended to, and really collaborating hard, which is what our big brains are made for, when we're facing finitude. So that's it in terms of the slides. And
so the example that we were reflecting on was how we express, how we translate things that we want to learn within the project, within NGL, into needs and learning needs. So that as an example of how we could build a curriculum for a particular organization.
Based on needs.
Yes.
Yeah.
Based on. So the things that we reflected on were really the things that we need within the project in terms of tending to learning that would help to fulfill our purpose. One example was how to create materials that would deepen our learning, for example.
Okay, so just to say that when we're done with this, we're going to give you a little bit of time in small groups, and you will have 4 options for what to do in your group. And we are demonstrating one of the options, which is one of you in the group will express something they want to learn within the project, a project that they're part of, and the group looks at what are the needs within that and begin to think about how to address it. All right, so let's look at creating materials.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So what is the need there?
We were just reflecting like on the All Ages Collaboration Lab, which meets the topic. And we've had several coaches offering different kinds of approaches to all ages collaboration. And one need I was sensing into is like having an overview and being able to orient myself within all these different approaches.
So,
okay.
So the materials would putting together materials based on what the coaches have been touching on would help, I think, to create some kind of coherence between the different approaches that the coaches are taking. So coherence would be one of the needs underneath the creation of materials, and I imagine another one would be able to pass on the knowledge that is being shared by different people in a way that maybe is visually attractive and accessible.
Yeah, and so then the question is, if those are the needs, how do we orient a curriculum to this? And I would add, it wouldn't be the same within if we want to bring this to an organization that is or isn't simultaneously focused on liberation. So it's like, you could solve the problem theoretically by hiring someone that would do the materials for us, but that would not actually address the real needs that are within the organization. So what we are trying to create a way of learning these particular skills that also is empowering and liberating for those who are doing it. So it's not just like, here are the people who already know how to do this. It's basically empowering people who've never had those skills to learn to think within this about how to create materials. So what I'm seeing is part of what the curriculum would include in this context would be guided questions to support people in being able to think through what materials we want to have, instead of there being somebody who already knows how to do materials, who just says, here are the materials, you just go do the task. So that is an example, and it's very, very small, but hopefully it's enough for people to see what you might be able to do in your group. So that's one possibility that you can do in a small group. Another possibility, and now I'm going to go back to the slides and just share with you the different possibilities that you can do in small groups. This is the one, the real exploration that we did. A second one is a simulation where this is somebody asked what to do in a mainstream institution. So you imagine that one of you is a professor and three of you are students that are there just for the degree, don't really care about whatever, they're just there for the degree and talking together about whether there is a shared purpose that you can create that would make the learning and the teaching more collaborative. The third is in the area of resource distribution, which is how to distribute medicine that is in short supply without there being money. Because it's easy to distribute it. When there's money, you give it to the people who have the money. And the last one is if you just want to talk about what you learned and take it in and talk with each other about insights, you don't want to do any of the activities. And we'll do it for just 10 minutes so that we can close within time. And Maura, you can now run the poll. So you will choose which of the four you want to do, and then you'll be put in a small group with other people who want to do the same thing. So just do it, whatever it tells you to do.
Could you just pop the slide back up again for a minute?
Is it possible to do while the poll is going? Hopefully, let's see.
It's also in the
Yes.
chat. It's in the chat.
I'm seeing that, okay.
I am not seeing it in the chat.
It's, oh, I'm sorry. It's in a direct message to someone. Okay, has everybody voted?
I see
Chosen?
so far 19 out of 35.
I would say anyone who didn't choose anything, just put them in the group 4, because that's the safest and simplest.
Okay, I was in Lorena's group, but I just wanted to say that we reached the point of we want to create a village, and we don't know how. Or I guess the conversation didn't get long enough for us to discuss that in depth.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, I'm glad you said this thing about creating a village, because I think that to reach the next level of knowledge about how to shift things on the planet, we actually need to come together again and not just continue to function as individuals. So I'm very glad that you were led there. Yeah. I can't remember your name, so I'm going to call you Miss Butterfly and probably remember you for the rest of my life as Miss Butterfly.
Yay.
But can you say your name again? Oh, Vanessa.
Yes, but Miss Butterfly
Yeah,
is my
I just remembered.
stage name. So I was in the group of simulation, and I kind of followed this. I like this coming out of this village idea, because in our simulation group, we really talked about how difficult it is to navigate functioning in a system of education, whether it be in a college system where everyone just wants degrees, or in a in a school setting, or for me it's marketing to parents, functioning in this system that tells you it needs to be X, Y, and Z, but having these values without a village, right? So we're in this world that isn't that village that we want. And I thought what was interesting is, at least for me, the note that we ended up with is kind of this idea of just being honest about where you're at with the students, is how I've been approaching it. I'm just honest to my kids. I'm like, she's 10 years old, but I'm like, look, starting the revolution right now, you know, on love. And I feel like, to me, it works.
Yeah.
She's 10, like my students are young sometimes, but they're really receptive to that honesty. And I think like, as long as we're open and there's something that I think is interesting about these conversations. It's like, we need to be honest about where we're at and the reality of the situation at the same time
Absolutely.
as holding those ideals and those dreams. I think that
Exactly.
yeah, and I think that honesty and is also coming from not shaming yourself for not being the utopic vision that you also have. And I think that self-shaming, I think that part of the presentation really like struck out to me, that antidote to shaming and blaming, because so much self-shaming happens also with people like us who have these thoughts of like what education needs to be, what the village needs to be, how we should be living in a capitalist, patriarchal world. And so I love that idea of like this antidote to shaming, because that recognition of your own capacity, because it's really an expression of self-love to know what it is that you can do, what it is you can't do, and what it is that you are at, and still accept that while having those visions. I think it's really beautiful so thank you for
Thank you. Thank you. Just want to say that one of the things that I have been talking about for some while is the idea of surrounding the patriarchal field with a field of love that's bigger than the patriarchal field and will melt it, rather than fighting the patriarchal field, which is the patriarchal energy stamp. Yeah. Who else? What are you walking away with that is staying with you? What are you thinking about still? Darpan?
Yeah, I mean, I was listening in the group, Vanessa, Ms. Butterfly was also there. And I think one of the things which comes to me was that the people who are trying to do something about recreating and ecologically making more and more people conscious about the choices. I think they struggle between the capitalistic ideas of living a life, because there is, especially the countries like India and some countries with like Africa and Latin America, where I think we still have a long way to go to catch up as far as our positive indicators of a lot of things which are materially we don't even have. For example, air pollution. So the people who are looking at it also, I think that sense is also there in the global north. That how do you create a balance between the aspiration of a green planet, but also not die today of hunger, because you need food to eat, and for which you need to do something about it. Whether direct thing is to exchange it with money, but I think this dichotomy, this is a very interesting dance, which I think all of us might be doing in different forms.
Yeah.
So this is one takeaway. I was resonating with the community, a call we had just some time back. Yeah.
I just want to say that there's something in the idea that you have a long way to go that reinforces the colonial paradigm that you are behind. And I think there is a long way to go for the global north to catch up with some of the things that are happening in the global south too. Yeah, it's integration that I'm looking for, not anything replacing anything else. Yeah. All right, then. Back to you, Ecoversities. Wangui. Let's hear from Wangui and then we close.
Yeah, I just want to appreciate, I think, both the session, but also in particular, the ways in which NGL and you yourself also on Fearless Heart, like the way that you this piece you were talking about, researching ourselves and sharing publicly the results of our experiments. Because I think there's something like when we are all doing all of these small experiments, sometimes it can feel like small, but I think when we share it, it's part of that storytelling that you were speaking about. And it really encourages people. Like, I know there's things that are shaping how I'm running my ecovarsity that I've learned from you sharing, you know, the experiments that you're doing with NGL. So just really want to appreciate that piece of storytelling.
Thank you. That's very nourishing. You know, you put things out and you don't always hear about what happens with them. So this is very, very lovely.